hoping we can somehow keep our lights on and our economy running by spending hundreds of billions of pounds on thousands of more windmills. More than once in the past week as our power stations have been thrashed away beyond normal peak power demand, the contribution of wind turbines has been so small that it has registered 0%. And it says electricity trading arrangements. There's this Google's net electricity summary page, and find the table of source by fuel type. At the heart of all this greeny make-believe that has our political class in its thrall has been the hijacking of the Met Office from its proper role. It's no longer just a national joke. It's turned into a national catastrophe. And ain't that the truth? But it's the same in every country, because you see, what they fail to mention here, there's a social agenda at work to change the world. And that's how they got the European Union up and going. They set up supposedly economic advisors across the countries, and then once they started getting money going into the EU, just for free trade, you understand, they kept telling the people they were setting up massive bureaucracies, because, you see, free trade took care of all economy. And if you run the economy, everything to do with the economy makes your laws, you end up as a concerted, unified group under a new system. Back with more after this. Hi folks, we're back and we're cutting through the matrix. Just to follow on from that last article though, I was talking about how they got the EU Parliament up and going, and they did it again through economics and giving money to, before it was a parliament, to this commission. They called it a commission. And what they did with the cash was set up massive bureaucracies in every country that tied all their economic laws together. If you tie up all your economic laws together, you don't have a country anymore. You have a new entity. And that's where the money from Cancun is going. It's going into every country to set up a massive bureaucracy that will deal with all your economics, because everything's to do with supposedly pollution and production and all the rest of it, and carbon output and yada, yada, yada. And out of that will come really the big arm, if not the world government, will be the big arm of the world government. That's what the money's all for. They know it's a con. They all know it's a con. I've read the articles here from many of the big players admitting that it's a con. Like McClelland in Canada, who is in the federal government, who said it doesn't matter if the science of global warming is all bogus, she said. It'll help to shape equality and put equality across the world. This is what they mean by the little terms. What they mean by equality doesn't mean what you think of. These are little terms they use in the globalist socialist society. Now, Denmark here gives away $7 billion USD, or 2% of its GDP, to carbon credit traders. This is quite a good one, actually, because the first ones in on the act are the con men. It says here, the Danish tax authority has been robbed blind by a carbon trading scandal that has rocked the market for carbon offsets. While the story saw some press a year ago, significantly higher losses have since been reported, and the MSM has ignored the story. The Danish Auditor General is on the case now, as the scope of the crime has become obvious and grown exponentially since it was first reported. Originally discussed as a quasi-small-time dollar scam, I remember at the time. The reality a year later is a lot larger. Europol is estimating a value on the case of 30 billion kroners, and the values seem to keep going up. Connie Hedegaard, then the Climate and Energy Minister for Denmark. As I say, when did we get these climate and energy ministers? It's a new religion. It's like having a high priest in your parliament, isn't it? That waves a censer in front of you or something and reads palms, you know. But it says for Denmark is now the EU Climate Commissioner. That's great. You see how they make a career in this? While she was with the Danish government, she helped set up and manage a system where there were no background checks on the listings of permitted traders. This removal of identification was done even though the EU requires at least passports. This helped a group of fake rogue traders set up a program that looted the Danish economy for up to 2% of its GDP and lost value-added tax. Here's how. It says, the Denmark CO2 permit registry was set up with extremely lax rules and regulations, possibly intentionally. Could very well be. In 2007, Ms. Hedegaard removed the requirement for identification. In a very short period of time, traders figured out the loopholes and started to back up the proverbial truck. How? To put it simply, you could round robin CO2 credits, booking the VAT as a bonus each time. What's painfully obvious is that over 1,100 of the 1,256, or about 88% of the registered traders listed in the system were bogusly set up for fraudulent activity. The traders have since been delisted as the scope of the crime becomes obvious. The fake but registered traders made up unique addresses for their businesses. In one famous case, a trader was listed as trading out of a parking lot in London. In another, the trader took the name of a dead Pakistani national. The fraud centered on the use of value-added tax as a mechanism to generate real non-taxed cash flow. An international trader would buy VAT-free credits from one nation and then resell them to a VAT-added customer in a second nation, pocketing as much as 25% of the cost of the trade as a personal commission. The trader then kept the value-added tax difference in lieu of selling in the VAT to the necessary tax system, effectively arbitraging the VAT system. And it says that this trade was coined a carousel, as the traders would re-export the credits claiming the value-added tax, only to re-import their credits and reselling them again with a new VAT assignment. They could wash, rinse and repeat bookings up to 25% value-added tax in the process each time. But that'll be happening in other countries too, because the whole of Europe, you see, once they amalgamate you, they always bring in a value-added tax. In Canada, they call it the general sales tax. Brought in Brian Mulroney, Lion Brian used to call him, and he said it was to help pay off the national debt. When he left, he was honest. He says not one penny went to pay off any national debt. But apparently when they unify the Americas as well, they want a GST, but I don't know how they'll get it into the States. It's maybe not time yet. So VAT and GST is just the same kind of thing. And it's causing mayhem even in Canada, the GST. Try to post something, and it's a different tax for each province you send it to. Now, in Canada too, most folk don't know it, there are exemptions from vaccinations. And but it's the same sort of exemptions you'd use in the military if you get called up for the military. It says vaccinations are not mandatory in Canada, and this is from Vaccination Risk Awareness Network. They're not mandatory in Canada. Unlike some countries, immunization is not mandatory. It cannot be made mandatory because of the Canadian Constitution. It's a bill. It's not really called the Constitution. But anyway, it says 3 provinces require proof of immunization for school entrance. That's Ontario, New Brunswick. All this music coming in. I'll read these off because you've got to know what they are to get your children exempt. Back with more after this.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
Hi folks, we're back and we're cutting through the matrix talking about vaccinations and exemptions, because a lot of folk have been writing to me about them in the States and elsewhere, and Canada too. And I'm putting a link up tonight to a site which gives you some data on what to do and so on for Canada. But it says here, 3 provinces require proof of immunization for school entrance: Ontario and New Brunswick for diphtheria, tetanus, polio, measles, mumps and rubella, Manitoba for measles. But exemptions are permitted on medical or religious grounds and reasons of conscience. That's the same as the military, isn't it? In wartime, when you're drafted. Legislation and regulations must not be interpreted to imply compulsory immunization. And that came out in a report, Immunization Canada, May 4th, 1997. And I've got the link for that too. And Canadian National Report on Immunization, 1996. This means that nobody in Canada can be forced to receive a vaccination. In some cases, nursery schools, daycares and other schools which are privately owned and operated can demand vaccination for enrollment, but publicly funded schools and daycares cannot. Furthermore, Canadian medical law clearly states that healthcare recipients must be informed of all significant risk posed by any invasive medical procedure that carries a risk of injury or death. Vaccination is such a procedure. Every Canadian must have received and understood all the information that is pertinent to the vaccinations to which they consent. Now, how many of them bother to? How many doctors tell you, or nurses, they don't even know themselves? Then there's legal exemptions and forms and so on. In Ontario, an exemption form must be notarized by one of a notary public or a lawyer or a commissioner of oath. The latter is usually accessible at any municipal building, and it's a lot cheaper too. And I've got a bunch of links too for you to look up and for your own information on more and more and more of this. But in the States too, it happens. You have these exemptions. Most folk don't know it. And I've had some amazing correspondence from people on their correspondence to the authorities that want them to be immunized. And when they say religious grounds, they come back at you and ask you if your belief system is in keeping with your minister, your priest, or your rabbi. In other words, they're trying to find out if you're just an oddball that won't go along, and they're trying to play religion and theology with you, your knowledge in theology and so on. But you can simply keep them running in circles for a while and waste their time until they give up. Because you are allowed, it's your body. If you're not in charge of your own body, then you don't have the right. You're a slave. You understand? You're a slave. If someone else owns you, when governments can say you must do this, and an injection is an invasive, it still comes under invasive surgery. Something's been stuck into your body. It doesn't have to be a scalpel. And something else pumped into it, all that foreign matter, from aborted fetuses and bits of chickens and pigs and all the rest of it all mushed together, which they call a science. But it's up to you if you want to get these or not. And Britain, in fact, have just announced that 67%, almost 70% of people last year in Britain got the flu shot, including the swine flu added into it. And it's got the same amount of folk with flu this year as last year. Of course, the excuse for that is, well, if everyone got it 100%, you see, there'd be no flu at all, which is rubbish because it tells you on the package it can't be guaranteed to stop you getting the flu. Anyway, there's Clint from Ontario on the line. Are you there, Clint? Hello.
Thanks for taking my call again.
Yes.
Quickly, I'll just talk about the vaccine form here, since you're on the subject. I have one of those myself, a while ago, and what it is, the Statement of Conscience and Religious Belief Affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from the Immunization of School Pupils Act of Ontario from 1990. Mm-hmm. And I got this form. It's from the Ministry of Long-Term Health Care. And again, like you said, you have to get it notarized from the Notary Public, which I have done so for myself and my son, because these vaccines are more than likely going to be made mandatory.
Yeah.
But I have a couple of quick questions I just want to ask you about, and then I'll hang up and let you speak. But it has things to do with the past weekend here of Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to ask you about Saturnalia, which I'm sure you might be able to tell us about. Where do you think Prince Willie was over the weekend? As you know, he was away from his family. They said he was on some flight mission or something, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. Would that be involved with Saturnalia, or was he involved in some sort of ritual on that day? And there's the new species that were found in Siberia in that cave.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear your take on those if you can. And as I got you on the phone, I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year before
same to you.
the day comes. Okay, Alan, thanks. Have a good night.
Yeah, I don't know about the new species they've found. I haven't looked into that, but I do know that the royalty, they do have the special times for upping them into the higher lodges, as they call them. You understand, too, the Duke of Kent traditionally is the head of the Grand Lodge of England, and he's the Queen's cousin. And they do like to get their boys into it. But there's also one particular realm of Masonry where you're jacked up there according to the age that you hit as well. And remember, too, they're sussed out. Everyone's sussed out to get into the higher knowledge. Because you can get someone who's not terribly bright, like Prince Charles, and who might let something slip out the bag. You couldn't quite trust him, so he wouldn't get too far. He got to the 40th degree on his 40th birthday, and that was celebrated in front of a crowd in England. I remember watching it on television, and he put his arm, of course, in the square,